The last episode was all about we're in it and how we're not going to get out of it. But how did we get into it in the first place? And for that, I kind of need to call out the group that is behind this that led us into that situation in the first place.
Okay.
I'm referring to the boomers.
Hold on. Have we got one in the room? Is he a boomer? What's
Might
the...
be before
what's the...
I think it's born between something like 1950, about there, maybe the late 40s, and...
Can you check it? Mm-hmm. We might have a boomer in the room with us.
Yeah.
46 to 64.
He's in. We've got a boomer here. All
It's
right.
all your fault.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerry. All right, so tell me about the boomers.
So I am not saying that there is anything wrong with the boomers as people. I'm not saying that Jupiter was in alignment with Saturn and in their birth years, and it happened to produce a particularly malevolent class of people. It's nothing like that. It's just that they were a very large generation going into a very small world. And what that did is it gave them a mindset which was true for most of their life, which is continuing to be implemented, which is at the root of a lot of these problems. So what do I mean by that? So the boomers, what they saw is they saw constant workforce expansion over their life. And that was initially driven by themselves because they were a very large generation. So as they came into the workforce, they grew it. They all went out, bought a suit, a car, a house. They expanded the economy as they went. And then even when that began to crap out, then you got the effects of globalization. China was brought into the workforce and India was brought into the global workforce. So throughout their working lives, they have seen this constant expansion. And when you get that constant expansion, it becomes very easy to implement pay-as-you-go government policies. So things like healthcare, pensions, welfare state, all that kind of stuff.
They also got the digital revolution.
Yeah, that's slightly different. So I think this is where it started to unravel.
Okay.
So this is probably the argument that Jeff Booth would make. So he makes it very well. So before I address the unraveling of that, the other thing is that they operated under an economic model, which if I were to oversimplify it, I'd just describe it as more. So there was always more. So it was another factory, another worker, another product line. It was all about that expansion. It's more, all the time. And the way that Jeff Booth describes that transition was looking at the case study of Blockbuster Video. So it was always one more store, one more video title, one more employee, that constant expansion. And then Netflix came along and they reduced the marginal cost of video distribution down to 0. And all of a sudden, that capital expansive model no longer worked. We had changed from more to more for less.
Okay.
So efficiency. So entering the digital age, it sort of flipped that around. So the boomers, they experienced that constant workforce expansion. They operated under a capital expansion model of the economy. And that is very supportive of fiat money, expanding fiat money. So one of the problems you will have, criticizing fiat money is, you can say, well, this all changed in 1971. And they can push back and say, well, yeah, but it's worked for the last 50 years. I mean, it's worked. I mean, it's worked for me. I've got a house, I've got a car, everything seems to be fine. Why is it that you're telling me that fiat money can no longer work for the next 50 years?
Well, because if you actually look at it, it's worked while we've slowly eroded the middle class.
Yeah. But you can see why a lot of people are going to feel superficially that it's worked.
Yeah, because they think they have more.
Yes.
So I made a film about inflation with Dominic Frisby, and he talked about this. And he said, what one salary used to provide, two salaries now can't provide. So we've gone to a stage where both parents tend to be working and they're still living to their limit of their budget, trying to have a house, have a car, and have their holidays. And people are getting squeezed. And he said this is essentially a squeezing of the middle class. And he said the best way to destroy a society is to destroy the middle class. I think he said it was a Stalin or a Lenin thing. But he talked me through that, and he talked about the inflationary increase in prices of things that the kind of day-to-day things like cars, houses, whatever.
And it's very obvious when you look back several decades, but you can understand why the people who are in it, I mean, they think, well, my house is now worth a lot more than I paid for it.
Yes.
It's very easy to get caught up in, oh, this has been a good thing for me, and you don't tend to notice what you've lost until you compare it to perhaps the next generation, who, husband and wife do both need to work. They both need to, put the child into childcare and, turn up at the office or whatever it is. So the other thing that I think is more relevant here is the government response to this. So the boomers wanted to be compassionate to their elderly, so they introduced a generous pension system. They introduced, they didn't quite introduce it themselves, but they expanded the rollout of the NHS and all of these other sort of insurance provisions. Now, when you are a very large generation supporting a small generation before you, that's very easy to do. So you can see why the government insurance programs have expanded to the point that they have. Now, of course, while they're doing that, they have normal levels of self-interest. They are wanting to, they've got half an eye on, yes, we're being generous to the elderly today, but we've also got half an eye on this will be nice for us when we retire as well. So then I'm not completely letting them off the hook, but it is primarily a demographic change that have led them into this situation.
And when you say boomers, is it unfair to pick on the people who've benefited from it, and this is really the fault of those who set policy?
Yeah,
because we all want more.
Yes,
We all work hard for more. Danny works hard. I work hard. Everybody work. You work hard. We all work hard for more. We all want a bigger house, or we all want that. So is it not really the fault of the bankers, the central bankers, and the policymakers who have led us into this desire for constant growth, ever expanding fiat money to support growth at all costs, elimination of the boom, or the bust part of the boom and bust cycle? Is it that who we should be blaming?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. There is, the mess we're in there's a lot of blame to go around. I'm just making the point that we have ended up with these enormously expensive social insurance level of spending, which has been facilitated by all those things that you mentioned, the central banking, the fiat money.
Okay, and this is why there's so much fear about population decline, which is evidently happening.
Yeah.
I think, what did I read? Japan, they're looking at a 25% fall in the size of the population over a certain period. We're not going to have enough workers to pay for everything for the retirees. You
can see why all governments, including the ones who claim to be against it, are in practice so in favour of immigration.
Yes.
Because they know that they need to get sort of more workers into the system, because the system has been designed to only function when there is more.
Well, driving growth requires a growing population of workers as well.
Yeah.
Or AI bots.
Yes, possibly.
Possibly. Okay.
So, this has led to an extraordinary level of boomer wealth. They saw significant real level housing increase. So this is beyond the rate of inflation. Real house prices has increased significantly. They saw their wages rise every year, and that went up until I believe the people born in about 1975. When those guys came into the workforce, it started to turn the other way. And so we've now had about 30 years or so of real-time wages decline. But nevertheless, this was sort of baked into the assumptions. Pensions is a big element of this as well. So a lot of the boomers had defined benefit. Defined benefit pension schemes.
Final salary pension schemes.
Yeah. And again, this goes back to them. That they sort of brought this stuff in wanting to be generous to the people above them, by bringing in the sort of pension stuff, but with half an eye on when they would want it themselves. And they started to make those, through policy, more and more attractive. So they did things like protect the benefits of widows if the main character on the pension were to die early, protecting the right of early leavers. And what it's done is it made those pension contributions quite excessive, really. So today, a lot of companies who have had in the past a defined benefit pension scheme, the vast majority of their contributions is going to that class of pensions, even though they don't offer it when they haven't offered it for many years now, to new entrants who are getting a defined contribution scheme. So a lot of wealth comes from that as well. Then there's benefit of things like the NHS as well. If you wanted to hit the demographic jackpot in life, you wanted to be born in 1956 because you sort of crested the wave of getting putting the least into the system while getting the most out of it as well. In terms of the NHS and other benefits that you got from the back of that. Now, what it's led to is that the people who are in their 70s today are on average 40% wealthier than people who are in their 70s just 10 years ago. So it is boomers have got a
compound growth.
Because you expect to get wealthier as you get older.
Yeah.
But it's well in excess of other cohorts from other decades.
Right.
So you've got that big concentration of expansion. And what it's given them is it's given them a whole set of faulty assumptions, which when you apply those today, are effectively breaking the whole system for us. So it's that constant workforce expansion. It's the expansionary money works for them. I think they have got away with fairly weak family units in the West that you don't see in perhaps Asian countries. So that's worth coming back to. Other assumptions, they've often assumed that old is the same thing as being poor. So if you looked at policymakers in, say, the 80s and 90s, if they wanted to do something for poor people, they basically just did something for pensioners because they were effectively one and the same thing. You didn't really even need to means test it. So everything from like free bus passes to sort of free entry to events and stuff like that. It is no longer the case that being old equals being poor. In fact, if anything, the retirees' disposable income now matches the average of working people.
Wow!
And if you go lower down the income band, so that say the poorest 20% of pensioners versus the poorest 20% of working, they're significantly above. So that's been a part of it as well. And so that has got me then thinking about the whole range of assumptions which our society is working under. Now, if you've got the wrong set of assumptions, when you try and solve a problem, you are going to end up making it worse because you've got the wrong assumptions going into this. Now, so far I've been, very generous towards the boomers, and yes, they have sort of led us to this point through policy preferences and voting preferences and everything else has gone along with it. And I certainly do take your point that there are other influences as well, the central banking influence behind that as well. So it's a combination of things of voting for politicians who've done this, but also the toleration of that kind of thing has had a big effect. So I'm not blaming them as people. It is primarily a demographic effect. However, there is one thing that does rankle me, and that is for the overwhelming majority of boomers, the TV is a primary sense organ. So try telling a boomer that something that they're told on TV is not the case. You can't make a boomer believe in something if he hasn't seen it on TV first.